everybody, and welcome to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, smash that notification, and definitely leave a comment. Don't forget to share the channel. Shout out today to Jay Williams, man. You got the hat game on Smash. You're making me up my game, bro, so it is what it is. I try to wear all New York stuff, man. You know, I'm from New York, so that's what I try to do. But anyway, today's video is going to be about, people have asked about my life, man, how I grew up. And I've given tidbits and different interviews that I've done with other people on their podcasts and things like that. And never went deep in depth, but maybe we'll do that today. People want to know how I became a crack dealer. I had one person ask me, how does a white dude become a crack dealer? Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, crack dealers come in all shapes, sizes, forms, and colors, at least where I'm from. I grew up in a neighborhood called Ghost Town. It's kind of a dangerous place. You know, it was a vicious, continuous cycle of poverty. My parents were kind of like, well, my mom was kind of like a rock and roll chick. My dad was a drug addict. He shot at me and my mother with a 12-gauge shotgun, and my mother left the house when I was 3. And I vividly remember that stuff, man. My mother throwing me over a fence, throwing me in a pricker bush, and I was escaping and getting away. But when that happened, my mother and my father were married. When that happened, things began to change, man. That's when it was real, man. That's when my mother became a single mother, right? She became a single mother. Struggling. Things were tough. Things were never easy. I grew up poor. My mother worked, but also got like partial welfare, whatever she had to do, WIC checks, all that good stuff, man. The story's all too familiar, man. It don't matter what color you are, man. A lot of people have been down this road. And those of you that have not, this is the road, man. This is the road that leads to prison. And people ask on the channel, you know, and they insinuate, well, you know, people had, you know, the right to make their own choices. And, you know, they get themselves into prison. And, you know, sometimes, man, you're right about that. But a lot of times, man, that's not the case. A lot of times people become a product of their environment. And, you know, just giving you an example, man, there was a point in time in my life when I only owned 2 pairs of jeans. And I believe I was in 7th grade, so I was probably about 11, 12. And I remember getting in a fight near my buddy Vince Longo's house. This dude ripped my jeans. And I was like, damn, man, I only got 1 pair of jeans. I had 2 pair of jeans with 4 shirts, and now I had 1 pair of jeans with 4 shirts. That's when life is rough. That's when life is real. And you get tired of being broke, man. You get tired of, you know, other kids, you know, talking about you behind your back, or you get tired of, you know, only having the bare minimums that make it. And you start to see people in the neighborhood, right, that are getting money. They got the girls, got the cars, they got the, back then it was the Bo Jacksons, the Jordans. And you look at them dudes and you're like, I want to be like them guys. But why do you want to be like them guys? Why are them guys the role models? And I'm going to tell you why. It ain't simply because they're cool, but it's because they're not struggling, man. They had passed the struggle behind them. And you look to them as the people that got out of the struggle. But at a young age and with a young mind, you don't understand that the struggle is much better than the struggle that comes later on. The struggle that comes with going to prison. But anyway, like I said, man, I'm from a neighborhood called Ghost Town. And, you know, I remember like it was yesterday, man. Some things just get embedded in your mind. I remember, you know, my neighborhood being violent. Back then it wasn't people shooting. There's a lot of stabbings back then. People hitting people with pieces of steel rebar, pipes, and baseball bats. And in the 80s and the 90s in my neighborhood, the Puerto Ricans had things on Smash. So, you know, you would see the Puerto Ricans fighting all the time. Stabbing, fighting, drinking. And that's the environment that you grow up in. And things just escalated. Things have gotten worse. And I've seen how worse they've gotten from the time that I was out there to the time that I went to prison. And when I got out of prison, I walked out to what I called a third world country. You know, back then, even when we were getting money, we were selling drugs, we still had some respect. We would respect older folks, respect the neighborhood. Not now, man. These dudes don't respect nothing. Like I said, man, Ghost Town's got its name for a reason. It is truly a ghost town. So, you know, I grew up hard, I grew up poor, and I watched my boy Booper. His uncle was a drug addict. He was a pimp. He had 4 or 5 prostitutes under him. Unfortunately, Booper's mother was also a prostitute. So he grew up in this crazy environment, this house with no stability, this house with no structure, a house with no mother, a house with no father. And he was allowed to sell drugs. And I remember he was selling dime bags of cocaine. And I'm like, man, he's got $200-300. And at 13 years old, you think $200 or $300 is something. That's back when we were wearing triple fat gooses. Those were $100. Jordans back then were $100. And Booper had those things. And I said, man, I got to get some money, man. I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of struggling. I'm tired of other kids picking on us. And that's when I started to sell powder cocaine. I started to sell powder cocaine for a dude that I had interviewed on this show, Yellow Boy. I went to him and was like, yo, man, I need to get on. And he gave me the opportunity. And sometimes, man, it's all right to laugh, right? You got to laugh to keep from crying. So he gives me the opportunity, puts me in what's called the gatehouse back then. We used to call them gates. So I'm in the gatehouse that night, and he tells me, man, when people knock on the door, you give them one of these for every $20, man. Now, I'm literally 13 years old doing this. A couple hours later, my mother's looking for me, and they find me. I remember my mother finding me with my sister's father, my stepfather, who was in and out of our lives. I always refer to my mom as a single mother because that's really what she was. But they find me, man. 13 years old, they bring me outside in the middle of the street, Lexington Avenue, and it's all right to laugh. They pull my pants down. He starts spanking me. Big drug dealer, 13 years old, out in the middle of the street, getting my ass spanked. Think about it now and you laugh about it, man. But it's crazy. It was a crazy life. And eventually, within months, my stepfather was gone. He was out of the house. Me and him had conflict. And now I felt like I was the man of the house. I had to run this thing, man. And again, I was tired of being broke. So what did I do? I'm going to tell you what I did. I bagged up some fake cocaine. First, I started with powder. We would buy this stuff called Dr. Scholl's medicine. It was a cold medicine, and you could sell that stuff because people would cook it like crack. This is right when powder cocaine was getting ready to, the crack epidemic was getting ready to hit, man, in my city. People were freebasing, people were cooking their own cocaine. So I started selling this BC cold medicine, man. People would cook it up, and they'd even smoke it. And they'd come back and say, oh, man, this stuff tasted like syrup, man, like medicine. I didn't even get high hardly. And some people thought they got high on it. And that's how I really started in the game, man, selling fake drugs, man. And in fact, I had sold some people some fake powder cocaine, and I remember them coming back in a minivan with a shotgun. 3 or 4 crazy-ass white dudes in a minivan. They slide the minivan side door open, and they shoot this shotgun off at me. Boom! Boom! And I take off. I run, I get away. But needless to say, I stopped selling fake cocaine at that point. I had made enough money to buy real cocaine, and that's what I did. I bought an 8-ball of cocaine, turned that 8-ball into another 8-ball, and then went to a 1/4 ounce, from a 1/4 ounce to a 1/2 ounce, 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce, and then it just escalated, man. That's how I became a drug dealer. That's how my life was. I was trying to get out of the struggle. I was trying to do it my way. For all the wrong reasons, all the wrong ways. And then when you get money, you start making money, and you were poor and messed up. You know what you do next? You start to believe in yourself. You start to look at yourself like, yo, I'm that dude, man. I'm providing now. I'm taking care of my mother. I'm taking care of my sister. I'm taking care of me. And then the next goal is you want a car. You want to get a car, man. And things just escalate from there. But do you become a product of your environment? Was I able to make other choices? I was. There was some stability in my life. But once my stepfather had disappeared, everything went downhill from there, man. My house became the party house where people could hang out. My mother, she had told me numerous times, I don't want you selling drugs, don't do this. That shit is in one ear and out the other when you're broke. Then me and my right-hand man, we end up committing an act of violence, and we go to prison. He gets a 2 to 6, I get a 2 to 6. I spent 2 years of my life in state prison, Attica, Comstock. I come home, and I jump right back into the game, man. I come home, I get a little job trying to make pallets and do all this other silly stuff that I thought was silly back then. And I make my first couple checks, and I'm like, man, what is this? And I jump back into the game, man. And I remember sitting on my mother's front porch, broke. I had just got robbed. I had enough money to buy a scale, some bags to put the crack in, and buy a 62. Back then we would buy 62 grams of crack, 2 ounces, 6 grams. And I remember bagging it up, and I said, I'm going to sit on this porch all summer, and I'm going to get some money. And that's what I did. When my homeboys were going out to the club, I wasn't going. When people were going out kicking it with chicks, I wasn't going. I thought that I was starting to build my own little empire. And I did it. I did that. But eventually what happened? Eventually getting money sent me to prison. Sent me to federal prison with a 40-year sentence. I know I use the word horrible all the time. It's horrible, man. It's horrible. I remember that first day when they walked me into that federal courtroom and I looked around. And for some of you older folks, man, like me, you might be able to relate to this. I looked in this place. I had never in my life seen a den. But for some reason, I seen the show Leave It to Beaver, Brady Bunch. And I said, this federal courtroom looks like some white person, some rich white person's den. And that's when they started talking. They said, he's facing a mandatory minimum of 10 years and a maximum of life, Judge. I was kind of intelligent back then. Mandatory minimum of 10. That means I'm going to prison for at least 10 years. Like, I'm not walking out of here. There ain't no bail. I couldn't even imagine, man. Being 24 years old, getting 10 years. Are you out of your mind? For selling drugs? Federal court? I thought federal court was only for mobsters and Colombian drug lords, man. Terrorists. At that time, that's what I thought. But boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. And then eventually, man, the case progressed. I didn't take the plea offer. And the government superseded my indictment. For those of you that don't know what that means the government said, okay, you ain't going to take the plea. We got something better for you. I had one count. And my one count became 16 counts. And my mandatory minimum went from 10 to 40. And by this time, I really knew what a mandatory minimum was. 40 years? I hadn't even been on the earth that long. But yet they wanted to lock me in a cage. Pretty much for the rest of my life. The best years of my life were going to be spent in a cage, man. All my 20s, all my 30s, all my 40s, all my 50s. And then they're going to let me out when I'm 64. With no skills, no people skills. I was just like, wow, man. This is it, man. This is my life. That's what drug dealing got me, man. Got me a 40-year sentence. And like I always say, man, by the grace of God, man, Donald Trump was the president and they passed that First Step Act and I got out, man. I got out. I can tell you every day that I'm thankful that I walked out of that prison. Because there were days, man. There were days when I thought I'd never walk out. There were days when I thought that I'd never see my city again. And I remember leaving my city after I was sentenced. Driving in a big old Escalade, U.S. Marshals. They're transporting us from the federal courthouse, all guys that got sentenced. And they're taking us to Youngstown, Ohio. Far, far away from my house. And let me tell you something, man. It's one of the most loneliest feelings you'll ever feel. You going to prison pretty much for the rest of your life. And I drove right by my neighborhood, right through Ghost Town on my way there. And I remember saying goodbye to my city. Goodbye to my neighborhood. And for some odd reason, I thought I'll see it again maybe when I'm in my 60s. And I thought about what would it look like as each house passed by me as we went. But I'm here now, man. I'm here. But you might not be that lucky. You might not be that lucky. If you pull that trigger, if you kill somebody, if you're out there getting money and you're a small-time hustler, but you turn it into being a big-time hustler, you start flipping bricks, you're that dude, you're that man. But you're only that dude, man, for a very short time. Think about it. How many drug dealers you see retire? Maybe once in a while. But I promise you, man, you don't want to be that dude. You do not want to be on that road. You do not want to be in that jail cell when it slams at night. And you're locked in all alone sometimes. It's just you and yourself. And that sentence. Get right, man. Get right. Get right before these people get you right. Because they do not discriminate. They don't care if you're black. They don't care if you're Hispanic. They don't care if you're Mexican. They don't care if you're Asian. They don't care if you're white. They send white dudes to prison for a long time, too. You know, we hear a lot of stuff in the news, but let me tell you something, man. I've been around a lot of white dudes that had 40, 50 years life sentences. There's another white kid from Ghost Town. Really, man, I heard the dude was a nobody. He's got a life sentence now, young kid. He's got a life sentence. He ain't never probably getting out. appeals, 2255s, some of the toughest things in the world to win. It's like hitting the Mega Millions winning an appeal in federal court. So get it right, man. Load on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.